Sorry. So the machine
Go
is
ahead.
normally turned off, right?
Yes. Once
Okay.
you're done with it, you would turn it off. If no one is using it, we usually just turn it off. So
Okay.
it asks for a ID code and a password.
Mm-hmm.
So the ID code is literally 1111. I can also email this to you. It's four ones, and
Okay.
you type enter,
Okay.
and the passcode is also the same thing, 1111, and you just type enter. It's a very okay. While that is warming up to start, you usually have a signing sheet where you would put in the date, the time, so when you would start the time, whenever you finished, your name, and you can also put like your name and what lab you're for, if you're lab you're from, and any notes. Um, Usually in the past, actually, it looks like we're about to run out of the sheet, so we might need a new sheet. Um, on the notes section, you would write like the speed that you're using or the rotor number, the type of speed you're using, but I'll go over that in detail during the training. But there's a signing sheet over here.
Okay.
Do you know what speed you're going to be spinning your particles at?
I don't really know, but probably it's going to be high. I like because I tried on our tabletop, like the small centrifuge, at 13.4 K, but it didn't
Mhm.
work. So I probably will
Oh,
go higher than
well, for me, I spin them at 50,000.
that. Okay.
Um, and we keep the motors themselves in this bag over here.
Okay.
So this is Sharma Labs motor. I believe we purchased this one, but if you want to use 50,000, I believe this is sufficient enough to use it. So
Okay.
it's usually on this stand. There's a stand attached to it, and we have to be very careful with it because at the bottom
Mm.
there are these barcodes that are supposed to latch to the ultracentrifuge. So you have to be very careful. We're trying to avoid it scraping. Part of it is already scraping off because this barcode has to match within the motor. And if the strip comes off, it's not going to recognize it. So
I
this
see.
is the
Yeah.
motor that I use. So I'm just trying to place it down gently. So this is the motor I use. Usually you just uncap it. And it has about one, two, three, four, five, six, about 8 slots for tubes. We
Okay.
purchased tubes for them, and I'll show you them right here. These are the tubes I use for my samples. One thing that you have to make note is that you have to fill it up towards the neck, because if you spin it down at high speed with the neck, it would collapse and your samples would basically just spill over in the little sections. So you would fill it up even if your sample is very small, you have to fill it up with water and cap it
Okay.
just to make sure there's no like air bubble space that can capsize the tube. Then you just place it in. So similar to like a benchtop centrifuge, you need a balance, something to balance it. And we also have like a scale just to weigh things, just to make sure they're around the same weight.
Yeah. Um.
Uh, Go ahead.
Sorry. So like, what's the volume of the tube? Do you know?
It holds about 7 to 8 mils, if I
Okay.
remember correctly, about 7 mils of water in it. And we
And
also have this. Go ahead.
that's the smallest one, or
They are bigger ones, but I do not. Ugh, sorry. I still lift things. Oof, this is heavy.
sorry.
There are bigger ones like this, but I have never used this one. I believe this belongs to the department, but we just keep it over here. And I believe it's for bigger tubes like this. I have
Okay.
never used these volumes, so I'm assuming this one's probably holds something like 15 to 20 mils. And you would just open it up and place it in here. But I have
Okay.
never used any of these motors before. One thing about the ultracentrifuge is that your motor has to be cooled down to below room temperature. So what I do is that I tend to, let's say I needed this to use this today. The
Yeah.
day before, I would have placed it in like the cold room to cool overnight. So
Okay.
we tend to like it to be like around 4 degrees, less than 10 degrees, just for it to cool overnight.
Okay.
Since like high heat will come from like the ultracentrifugation over time, so we like to cool this overnight. So you can place, if you're going to use ours, we would recommend that you put it in the bag and just place it in a cold room overnight. Then next morning when you need to use it, you can place it in here.
Okay.
So back to this. Why I was asking what temperature you're going to use is that you can adjust the temperature that you need by just, this is a touch screen, so you can just touch it and change the temperature to whatever, the rate of your speed to whatever speed you need. So you just enter in the keypad. So I use 50,000, so I never really change it, and just hit enter.
Okay.
For the time is also a touch screen, so you can click on it and you can change the time. I usually use 30 minutes, so I would just enter 30 minutes. Then the temperature, this is what I said is important. The temperature has to be around 4 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
So assuming if I left that in the cold room, I would just come in the morning. You're supposed to use gloves on this, and you would just put the latch, and you place it in here. So the bottom that I was showing you has to connect to this rim, and it also slightly rotates. I'll just do an example prep and put my phone down. So the bottom right here has to connect to this. So you just place it in there. I mean, it would still rotate. That's totally fine. Like, it still moves, but you just have to make sure like it's actually in that whole position. Then when you're done, you would just close it.
So there is not a lock at the bottom, right?
No, there's no lock. It's just like you would hear it latch once you close it back. Then you just make sure your speed is what you want it to be, the time is what you want it to be. Yeah. If it had been in the cold room and it was cool, you would see like this temperature would start to drop to make sure it gets closer and closer to 4 degrees.
Okay.
Once the temperature, while the temperature is dropping, the most important thing that you have to set vacuum. So the ultracentrifuge has to be in a vacuum position just to make sure the door is latched and it can run correctly. So there's a button right here that says vacuum. I'm not going to touch it because I'm not using it for anything. So once you hit vacuum, where it says from low to high, there are 3 levels. There's low. Mm-hmm. There'll be like a bar that shows that it's increasing from low to high, and there are 3 bars. So you would recommend that it hits the 3 bars before you hit the start, before you start leaving it. And it usually takes about, the first time, it will take about 10 minutes max for it to reach that high point. Then after that, if you're doing multiple cycles, it will probably take less than 10 minutes, about 5 minutes to reach that high point. So we recommend that the vacuum reaches high before you start it. And one thing you would notice, like once the vacuum is achieved, you can't open this till you release the vacuum. So this will be automatically locked. What else? Since there are different type of rotors, you have to identify which rotor you're using on the ultracentrifuge. In order to do that, you're gonna hit RLM and select enter. So the one that I use is the T890, and that's the one that I just placed inside the ultracentrifuge itself. You can scroll down, and once it's highlighted on it, you just select enter. Then it would say a comment, desired item you want to do. Number 1 is running, which is what you're going to select. Number 2 is creating or changing, and number 3 is deleting. You just select 1 because that's the motor that you're using for the ultracentrifuge, and you select enter. So now it's recognized that it's the T890, and it's telling you the total revolutions. This number, you have to make note of this number on the logging sheet. So So I usually write under notes and comments that the total revolutions, I would write the number. I would also write the motor that I'm using and the speed that I'm using. So over time, I just write T, 80, 90, 50,000, and the number of revolutions. And the number of revolutions tends to change as we keep using it over time, which is fine. It's just like we keep using the number of revolutions that has a chord, the number would increase. With everything set up, once your vacuum has reached 3, you've like put the motor that you're using. Honestly, all you have to do is select start, and slowly once you select start, you would see like the speed number over here would the speed number over here would start to increase over time till it matches the desired speed you selected. You see your time will change based on how long it's been in there. The temperature, again, you have to make sure that it's as close as possible to 4. As long as it's under 8 or 10 degrees Celsius, that's fine. It should never be like at room temperature. That should not happen. So as long as it's close as possible to 4, you should be fine. So it would start spinning, and you would hear like a sound. I don't know how to describe the sound. It's just like something spinning, and it should be a consistent sound, and you can set a timer, go away, and walk away. So the major thing is that I'll make sure your samples in the motor are balanced. They're around the same weight. So if one of your tubes is about 15 milligrams, make sure your balanced tube is also 15 milligrams, just to make sure everything is balanced. Fill up your samples close to the neck of the tube so there's no air pocket, so it doesn't collapse as it's spinning. Once the vacuum is achieved, you cannot open this latch at all. What else? So assuming your sample has finished running, it's done with the 30 minutes. If you did 30 minutes, the device will actually make a beep noise to tell you that it stopped, but sometimes it's hard to hear with all the background noise going on. You will just come over here and you have to release the vacuum. So there's a vacuum button right there.
Okay.
That you just press, and you would watch the bar go from high to low to like empty. There wouldn't be any bar marks like here because the vacuum has been released. And once the vacuum has been released, I would wait like about 30 seconds to a minute before you can open this latch. Because sometimes, even though the vacuum says it's all gone, it wouldn't let you open this latch because the vacuum technically is still being released over time. So once the vacuum is released, you can just open it up and gently lift it out. You gently lift it out. I would always recommend placing it on the stand just because of the safety strip at the bottom. I would close this. If you still have another run afterwards, like let's say you're doing like 3 runs, and while you're handling your sample out of the motor, I would initiate the vacuum again while you're working with your samples so it can maintain that cool temperature in here while you're working on your samples.
Okay.
So I'll just recommend taking out your samples. If you have like a forceps like this, I would recommend bringing it with you because sometimes, let me set something up real quick. Because sometimes while it's spinning in the ultracentrifuge, moisture can, like water vapor can arise and they can adhere to the tube, which will make it kind of difficult to take it out because the moisture just makes the tube want to stick to the inside. So sometimes I would have this with me so I can just go in and use it to lift it. It makes it easier. So in case you have that one in your lab or you're using this, I would recommend bringing this along with you.
Yeah, thank you.
So you just take it out. And for me, I usually put tape. It's fine for you to put tape on the tubes just to label and to make sure what your samples are.
Okay.
If you are completely done with your runs. Because of that beautiful moisture can like water can settle at the bottom of the tubes, and that has to be clean to avoid like rust buildup. What I would usually do is that I would grab paper towels and I will lay them flat. Then I will take this and just turn it around so the water vapor can like fall down. It's okay. Like I would usually leave this for like a few hours or overnight. Then I'll come in the morning and I'll just take it back and put it back on the stand. So in that case, you can always let me know and tell me that, oh, you left it to dry overnight, and I'm happy to like put it back away the next day for you.
So you don't use any ethanol or anything to clean it?
No, I avoid like what I would recommend in adhering to like COVID restrictions and everything. You can take like a little bit of ethanol on a paper towel and use it to wipe, but I would highly not recommend like spraying ethanol directly on this or do not spray directly into this, because we're just trying to avoid like moisture building up or any liquid inside. So you can take paper towels, just spray ethanol on the paper towel and use it to like wipe down the surface. Similar to here, do not spray ethanol directly on the device, spray like on a paper towel and use to like wipe down on the surface. So for me, I'll wipe down on the monitors, make sure I wipe down on the handles and the switch. Like just use the paper towel to rub the switch, because that's the common touch points. Like I don't mess with any other thing on this. Do you have any questions?
So what does the department rotor run at? I mean, because yours goes 50,000. Do you know what levels ours runs at?
To be honest, I do not know, because
it's okay.
I've never used it. I've never used this. I've never put it inside a motor.
Okay.
So I think that might require some experimentation, Jackie, if you want to use this one.
Well, it's good to know. I didn't realize that the blue one was yours too. So if anybody ever uses it, they'll definitely need to coordinate with you too before they use it.
Well, actually, it says on here, it says the maximum speed is 30,000.
Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Okay. So I guess that's why we got this, because we can use this for 50,000. I have never attempted to go above 50,000 using the T8090. So I feel like that's something I have to, if you want to go above that speed, I would have to probably, looks like it's a Thermo Fisher. I would have to look up a Thermo Fisher and see what's the maximum speed this can handle.
Okay.
Cool.
I think that's generally the whole gist of everything.